Felix, kitty, you cannot be here. Get down, kitty. Nope, 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 nope. Oh, nope, that's hot. Okay. All right, I gotta wash my hands.
Just let the people know you're washing your hands.
I'm washing my hands. Hey everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a perfect brunch recipe. It's my creamy greens pie. It has everything you want in a meal. It has jammy eggs, delicious creamy greens, a buttery pastry crust. It's kind of a hybrid of a bunch of different brunch dishes, but it's so delicious and pretty easy.
Tell us why this is your Citizen Kane.
The Citizen Kane of recipes?
Your Citizen
That means
Kane.
no one's gonna make it. Who's seen that movie?
Cal. I'm saying like 10 times.
Hopefully this is the Die Hard of recipes. It's never enough. So this dish is kind of like a mashup of a bunch of different things that I really like to eat. So one is quiche with like a buttery pastry crust and filling and eggs. The other is something called torta pasquialina, which is like a Tuscan kind of greens pie, double crust. It has a lot of Swiss chard in it. Super delicious. And then it also kind of pulls from a dish I love, which is like cream spinach at a steakhouse, a classic dish. So it has elements of all of that, but really it is a buttery crust with lots of greens and eggs baked on top. It's just everything I want to eat all the time. It uses a lot of greens, so if you're someone that struggles to like eat a lot of green things, this is a great way to do it. I have one portion of my buttery pie dough from Dessert Person, my go-to. Then I have 10 ounces of frozen spinach thawed and squeezed to remove moisture. 8 cups of torn Swiss chard leaves plus 8 cups of kale. Recipe calls for Tuscan, I can only find curly, that's fine. Kosher salt, unsalted butter, dried dill, recipe calls for fresh, I'm using dried, ground nutmeg, some finely grated Parmesan cheese, this is actually pecorino, heavy cream, 7 large eggs, salt, pepper, some all-purpose flour, and an onion. I'm gonna blind bake the pie crust. So I have pie weights right here. This is just 4 cups of dried beans. You can use dried rice. This pie gets baked in a skillet, and I'm using the made-in 10-inch carbon steel skillet, which I think of carbon steel as being great for searing, like making the perfect steak, but it's also really good for baking in for the same reason. So I'm going to bake the pastry directly in here. Before I get into today's recipe, I want to thank our sponsor, Made In. They are the makers of this award-winning Made in France carbon steel cookware. It comes in 8, 10, and 12-inch skillets, along with a griddle, a wok, a couple other styles. You get the lightweight feel of stainless steel cookware with a lot of the searing properties of cast iron, but it also heats up and cools down more quickly and is so versatile. It works on all different styles of stovetop, from the induction that I'm using to gas to electric. Plus it can go straight into the oven, and you can even take it outside and cook with it over flame up until 1200 degrees. Wonderful for searing meats and charring vegetables, but also great for baking in. One of the great things about carbon steel cookware is that over time it develops a natural nonstick surface. So if you're looking to make the switch from a coated nonstick cookware to uncoated, this is a great bet for you. It's non-toxic and super effective. Head over to madeincookware.com and use the code below. You can get 15% off your entire order, and be sure to check out their line of carbon steel cookware. Also check out Made In's YouTube channel for recipes, also tips for maintaining and getting the most out of your carbon steel cookware. So thank you, Made In, for being our sponsor today, and let's get back to the recipe. The first step of the recipe is to line my 10-inch skillet with the pie dough. So I have my pie dough here that's been chilling. I'm gonna roll this out. I have a little bit of bench flour here. This is 4 cups of dried beans, which I use as pie weights. They make actual pie weights, which are like little ceramic spheres. I don't love them. They tend to be really expensive, and I like to use a lot. So I use dried beans or rice. That's totally fine. My normal method for rolling out is to work it a little bit with a rolling pin. Now I'm beating it to soften the butter so that I can roll it out and it becomes pliable without it getting too warm. But the thwacking also helps to like manipulate the shape a little bit. So I'm gonna try to get this into a little bit of more of a round shape. So for the 10-inch skillet, I should roll this out to about a 13-inch round, and then I'll have a little bit of overhang and I can trim the edge and make it nice and flush. So to fit in this skillet, about 13 inches. And when you're rolling, remember, keep it moving. So you don't want it to stick to the surface. You want it to be able to glide across the surface as you're rolling. And then as you spin it, you can kind of pick up some of the flour on the surface, prevent it from sticking. Whatever shape the dough is in when it's chilled is the shape it's going to want to be when you roll it out. And so it can be a little bit hard to go from something that's square shaped to a circle or vice versa. So I like to focus on the margins when I'm rolling, and obviously applying even pressure so that I'm not making one area thinner than the other. But by keeping it moving and rotating it, you will be able to work it into more of a round. But if you see any areas where it's like this edge is a little bit flat, give it a little extra kind of roll. So that should be enough. So what I'm going to do is roll the pastry onto the rolling pin, then unroll it into my skillet, like so. And when you're lining anything, whether it be a skillet or a pie plate, you want to let the pastry naturally slump down. You don't want to like stretch it as you press it into the pan, and fill that out. And now I'm just going to pat it sort of gently up the sides. And there might be some areas where it overlaps. Naturally, that's fine. Just kind of press on the seam. Overall, I have about a 1/2 inch overhang, in some places more than others, but now I'm gonna trim. So I want a nice flush, kind of smooth edge. So I'm gonna take a paring knife and just run it horizontally along the rim of the skillet and just trim away any pastry that goes above the rim. So now I'm gonna line it with some foil and pour in my pie weight. This is a piece, well, I just ripped it. This is a piece of foil that I had saved from something else. And I'm gonna do a double layer and have a piece of foil going in the other direction as well, just for safety. I recommend heavy duty foil for this because you will need to lift the pie weights out, and it's really annoying if the foil breaks and then the pastry gets the pie weights stuck to it. In addition to dried beans, you can use rice of any kind, but I think the most economical is dried beans, so rice. So I'm gonna fill this up. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. So initially we bake this a little sort of hot, and that heat helps to sort of set the crust, and then we bake it again uncovered at a lower temp. So this goes into the oven. I love doing it in a skillet because I automatically have means of getting it in and out. It's about 25 minutes at first. So while the crust blind bakes, I'm going to make the filling, which is really fun to make and really delicious. So for the filling, the first thing I want to do is blanch all my greens. So I'm using 3 different kinds of greens for the recipe. One type is just frozen chopped spinach, which is a great product. I see no reason to bring a whole bunch of spinach home, clean it, blanch it, just to get to this point. So I thawed it and squeezed it out. That's off to the side. But I'm adding other kinds of greens. I have Swiss chard and I have kale. So 8 cups, sort of loosely packed leaves that I already stripped from the stalks. Obviously it's a lot, it cooks down quite a bit. But the main sort of substance of the filling is green, so we want a lot. I'm gonna work in batches because I have a lot of greens here and not like the biggest pot. So work in however many batches you need. But I'm gonna plunge the greens into the boiling water for just a minute or 2 until they're wilted and bright green. Then, rather than using an ice water bath, which is a common technique for blanching, cools everything down really fast and sets the color, I'm just gonna rinse under cold water in a strainer, so it's a little bit faster. So I'm just tossing the greens with my hands, and then once they feel cold to the touch, then I'm good. And you want to break them up because it will trap heat in the center of the pile.
Do you think if you had Harris's 50-gallon stock pot, that would have been a faster process?
I could do it all in one batch. That's about all I can say about that. So I'm going to continue to really wring these out. You want to extract as much water as possible. And this was rainbow chard, so I had those bright red stems, so the water is a little bit red actually. So I'm going to give this a rough chop. The idea is that you don't really want to have to go in for a bite and then pull a huge, long, kind of stringy leaf of something out. So it doesn't have to be super fine. But you can see that was 16 cups of greens, which has now cooked down to probably more like 3 cups. I'm going to combine that with the spinach. Now I can really start the filling in earnest, and I'm going to start by chopping my onion. I just have an onion here and then a little bit of a leftover shallot, which is fine. I always chop onions right down to the very little stem, and then I actually just kind of chop that up too. A little shallot friend. I'm gonna pull the crust out, and now this is the step where we uncover it and lift out those pie weights and then continue to bake it uncovered so that the bottom gets golden brown and starts to cook through. So I'm gonna turn the temperature down. So we had it in at 400, I'm gonna turn it down to 350, and it's gonna go the rest of the way at 350. Remember, anytime that you're baking in a skillet, don't forget that the handle is hot. So I like to leave a towel on it, just a good cue. And I'm just gonna lift out. This is why the heavy duty foil is handy. Right back in. So I have a separate medium skillet here, a 10-inch, and I'm gonna cook the filling in here. I am starting it over lower heat because one tip about carbon steel is when you're cooking on induction, just to prevent warping, start it low. So I have 3 tablespoons of butter, then the onion goes in. So I'm actually gonna turn up the heat a little bit and just sweat this down. I want this to cook until, I don't need it to brown, but I just want the onion to be translucent and tender. And that'll take a few minutes. And then I'm also gonna grab 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour. And that is as kind of a thickener and like binder in the filling. The filling is kind of bound by 1 egg and a little flour. What am I gonna do about this mat, you guys? Look at it. Put those things down. It moves anyway.
We just need a better adhesive.
Damn it.
Is that just so we could see your clogs?
No. Those aren't even my good clogs. I am ready to sprinkle in the flour. Just 1 tablespoon, it's not that much, and I'm just going to sprinkle it over and then stir it into the onions until everything is well coated. Now in go the greens, so the flour cooks in really quickly. The point of this is to further drive off any moisture in the greens, kind of coat them in a little bit of that fat. Obviously incorporate the onion and get everything together.
So it's not hot over on the side there.
No, this is not hot, which is amazing. It's good for the cats too. Part of the decision was the cats.
You have cats?
This is done. I'm gonna turn the power off. So then I'm gonna finish the filling back on our station, off the heat, because I'm gonna add the cream and a little bit of cheese and an egg just to bind everything together. This I haven't really seasoned yet, so I'm just gonna season. I mean, the greens were blanched in salted water. I'm adding, the recipe calls for parm. I'm adding pecorino, which is pretty salty, so I'm not gonna go crazy with salt, but I do want a lot of black pepper in here. So to finish the filling, I have 7 eggs total. 6 of them get cracked on top and baked, but 1 of them goes into the filling. So I'm gonna start with my egg. And the reason I'm not just adding this directly to the skillet is because I don't wanna scramble the egg as I add it to the hot green mixture. So you could whisk this, I'm just gonna beat it. And I'm gonna stream in heavy cream. I have 2/3 of a cup of heavy cream. This is where then the filling kind of channels delicious steakhouse cream spinach. Hence the name Creamy Greens Pie. The recipe calls for fresh dill. I like that combination of dill and greens. This is dried dill, which it's something a little bit different, but I've like weirdly been very into dried dill lately. So I'm gonna do this to taste. Dried dill, it's really good. And then I'm gonna add the tiniest bit of ground nutmeg. So a classic flavoring for cream spinach. Anything where there's like a bechamel, like a sort of milk sauce, you add a little bit of nutmeg. It's a very French touch. And I learned in culinary school, they say like the point of a knife, like that much. So just probably like a 1/16 of a teaspoon. You just want it in the background. It creates this kind of nice, spicy warmth. And then I'm gonna stir in, it's about a 1/2 cup of finely grated cheese. This is pecorino, as I keep saying. Use parm, use whatever you like. Then in go the greens. I might hold back some of this. The volume of it might be a little bit greater than normal just because of the curly kale. Because I think this looks good. This looks like the right proportion of liquid to greens. The crust is ready. It's been in at 350 uncovered for 20 to 25 minutes both each time, with the weights and then without. One of the great things about carbon steel is like if this were cast iron, it would be so heavy. And I don't have the strongest hands, so I love that I can easily grab it in and out of the oven. I let it cool. It's not cooled, but it's cool enough that I'm not going to like cook any egg that's in the filling when I scrape it into the pan. I'm gonna add all of the greens. Because there's not a lot of liquid in the filling, it's really forgiving. So if you have cracks in your crust, it doesn't really matter because it's not gonna like seep through. Unlike a quiche where cracks are a problem. I'm gonna take my spoon and make 6 little divots in the filling all the way around, sort of evenly spaced. And this is where I'm gonna crack the eggs. Anytime I make baked eggs, it always surprises me how long it takes for the eggs to actually cook because the heat from the oven is just so much less direct than the heat on the stovetop. So it'll go for like another 25 minutes or so. To me, it's not really possible when you're baking eggs to have a set white and a runny yolk. Either they're both runny or they're both set. So I would much rather have a kind of jammy set yolk and set whites than runny whites and yolks. So I go until both are set and firm, but there's still like a nice bit of translucency in the yolk. So I have my 6 divots. I'm gonna fill them, just one at a time. I'm gonna season just the eggs. Everything else is well seasoned. A little bit of salt and a little pepper. And now into the oven carefully. I want set whites, jammy yolk. They'll go in for about 25 to 30, but I'll check them and give it a little poke when you feel a little bounce back. That's how you know everything is set. The pie is done. Eggs are set. It went closer to 30 minutes, but the whites are solid. The yolks are jammy, not dry. I'm gonna cut a slice. It smells so good. So with that egg and a little bit of flour in the filling, the idea is that it sets the filling so you don't just have like a pile of green. So you should be able to cut a nice slice. Has the right amount of seasoning, not too salty, but it's well seasoned. I love like that little bit of nutmeg, cream spinach meets spanakopita a little bit, but then I love having that buttery pie crust underneath, and then you get the texture and also the kind of like goodness of the egg.
Would you ever enjoy that with hot sauce?
Oh yeah. Then just for a little extra heat, just a little hot sauce on top, but really good. And then just you can eat it like a pizza. The crust is like really well baked. And even though there's some moisture from the filling, it didn't get soggy. And a lot of that has to do with how great of a conductor the carbon steel is. It just gives you such a flaky, crispy crust. So this was a great application, I think, for the Made in Carbon Steel pan. I want to thank our sponsor Made In for this episode. Again, use the code Claire15, get 15% off your entire order at madein.com. Check out their line of carbon steel, awesome cookware, and try making this pie. Perfect breakfast, lunch, or dinner meal. It's like exactly what I want to eat all the time. Super delicious. And don't forget to like and subscribe.